Hello and welcome to the CFB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuce 85. Your boy, the niche sports connoisseur. We're out here grinding away bowl season. Tonight was a hell of a day. We loved it. We did great. Man, some great games today. Bowl season was fun today. It's been a pretty lucrative bowl season thus far. Hope you guys had a great Christmas and or holiday if you celebrate. Uh, Me had all four kids under one roof. Doesn't happen very often. My older son, who is 18 now in college, was here for the last couple of days. That was a fun experience. Did our thing. And we're back at it. We're going through the grind here. We have a plethora of games tomorrow, 5 games in all. Then we have 8 actually on Saturday. The slates are shaking out as a 4-gamer for tomorrow, plus the showdown between Oklahoma and Navy, which is 9 a.m. PST. And then we have the 7-game main slate on Saturday and the showdown between UConn and North Carolina taking place 1 hour before that at 8 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast. Wish they would have just made those into one super slate there, a 5-gamer and an 8-gamer, but that's okay. On FanDuel, they did go ahead and proceed with a 5-gamer. So I'm going to just basically go through here. You might notice I don't have Jake Kuchek with me, who I normally have. Feeling a little bit under the weather here. He's doing the holiday thing with his family. And all it takes is, when you have a kid or two, all it takes is one of them getting sick, and you know how it rips through your house. So he's not feeling too well tonight. He wasn't able to join us. That's no problem. It's all good. The show will go on. We will have him here in spirit. Because of the fact that I don't have him, though, I am going to attempt to not do a 2-hour show. So I'm going to go through each of these games and kind of just give like a best bet, which we've been really, really hot on right now, and then kind of like talking about any relevant opt-outs, any players that we can kind of look to for DFS purposes, and then work our way game by game that way. There will be the free article that's been dropping each and every bowl game on bowl game day, I should say, on FTN Fantasy. Basically go through with our DFS targets and best bets and a little bit of a breakdown there on each of the bowl games and playoffs that take place. So this is really it, the last hurrah for the weekend, and then we've got the playoff games, the last few stragglers. So let's take this opportunity. Let's make some money. Let's find those green screens. Let's get to the window. We also have college basketball back on tap on Saturday. And the little, Diamond Head Classic, which is always so fun there during the Christmas Day experience. And then we have a few days off, so we'll be back in that grind. Unfortunately, the Diamond Head Classic is moving to Thanksgiving next year, which means we'll have no basketball on Christmas Day from the collegiate world. That's very sad. I don't like that one bit, but I digress. Let's get into this. Let's make it happen. Hey. I got top 20 Louisiana Law. Took Arkansas money line plus 300 against Bowling Green and cashed. Yes, sir. We had the over on that one today. That one went really, really well. Best bet Georgia Tech -3. Dig it. All right, so starting off with the showdown here between Oklahoma and Navy. This is the Armed Forces Bowl. Total of 43. Oklahoma is a 2.5-point favorite. Stylistically, these teams couldn't be any different. Oklahoma, of course, has had a plethora of injuries at the receiver spot. Jackson Arnold had a really, really rough go of it for the most part. They turned to the youngster Michael Hawkins, who did have some flashes, but overall he just was not ready. And they went back to Jackson Arnold to finish off the season. Well, Jackson Arnold is no longer on the team. He will be with Auburn. Auburn revamping their offense and their quarterback play. So he's not there. Then that means they will have Michael Hawkins and an opportunity to really get him some confidence and head into next season with him as their guy. Not really too keen on him. If this was on a classic slate, I probably wouldn't even be looking at this game that much. I feel like possessions, there's not going to be a ton there. Obviously, a lower total. Navy's going to run the football. We know that, and I'm just not that confident in Hawkins right now. Running through the opt-out list and transfers, injuries, all of that. Jackson Arnold, Joe Barnes, who is injured, he's questionable right now. Caleb Hicks, who hit the transfer portal, and then the receivers that have transferred or in the process of doing so: Andrew Anthony, Brennan Thompson, Jaquaze Petaway, and Jaleel Farouk. In addition to that, Nick Anderson and J.J. Hester. In addition to that, the tight end Bauer Sharp. Injuries-wise there, Jaden Gibson, he's out. He's been injured a lot. And then Deion Burks, who is technically questionable, but it would be a relatively big surprise if he did play. Now, on the Navy side, they don't have nearly as many, like basically none, impact-wise. The fact is Blake Horvath, their quarterback, who is relatively banged up to a degree, did play in the Army game, pulled that upset there. He'll go. They have their full arsenal, essentially. Oklahoma is going to be sending out a lot of second-unit defenders, third-unit guys. So this is a really interesting spot here for the not only the under, but the Navy side as well. We ran pretty well on underdogs today. Toledo plus 6.5. That cashed. Once we got into the third overtime, that was done. Did have the Rutgers plus 7, which we got there, despite some Greek rifle mishaps there in the second half. And then we did have the over 53.5 in the Bowling Green game, which was fantastic. So an underdog type of day today. We'll see if that continues, but I do lean towards Navy. As far as that goes, Blake Horvath, the obvious showdown captain, he is going to cost you at $18K, but he's going to run the football a lot. 204 yards against Army. So much for being injured there. Put up a massive 48 fantasy points over on DK. So you start your lineups there. That's pretty obvious, right? There is some intrigue there for Xavier Robinson, who a couple of weeks ago, I should say, against Alabama, rushed for 107 yards on 18 carries. He has a ton of upside. Certainly the preferred look there for Oklahoma for me. As far as anyone in the receiver side of things, with all of the injuries and portal mishaps, it's going to be really hard for Hawkins to have anybody that he can feel, comfortable with or have any real continuity with. So I think we're going to really just want to hit hard on kickers, which I know is going to sound weird, and running backs in this game, and of course Blake Horvath. As far as anyone you can really look to, Nathan Kent at 4.2 for Navy as a pass catcher, somewhat interesting, I suppose. As far as the Oklahoma options there aren't a ton to really feel great about. Hester would have been the guy if he wasn't transferring. Jacob Jordan did have 6 catches for 42 yards against LSU on week 14. He's going to be the guy mostly to look to. He had 5 plus catches, in 3 of his last 5 games, 1.6K there on the showdown slate. All right, let's throw that aside. Like I said, I do like the Navy side there. Plus 2.5, I guess. I would just take the money line and roll that and the under 43. That is how I am feeling. Yes, it is crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time we wake up in the morning, and the middies are basically close to favored, if not even -1 there on the Oklahoma side. You just don't have any of your first unit guys. It makes it pretty tough, right? And the fact that it even opened at -9 before a lot of that news came out kind of shows you what kind of edge you'll have if you're on top of it. We had some pretty solid lines today, but yeah, Oklahoma, it's a tough spot. It almost feels like a no bet there just because of that movement, but I do think Navy ends up winning this one. All right, moving on to the classic slate of things. The Birmingham Bowl between Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. Total of 50, Tech -3. Did have the comment there in the chat. Regarding Georgia Tech as the favorite there at -3, and they're the best bet. I do like that as well. We'll go back to the comments here. Thanks for the video. What will be the lineup construction at captain for showdown? So for that one, I would be all over Blake Horvath. Maybe some Xavier Robinson. He is my preferred and favorite weapon on Oklahoma at this point, and the last of the kind of high upside fantasy options that they have. It's definitely I wouldn't say high edge showdown. There are a lot of players that are out that don't have designations on DK, so maybe people will overlook them. We did have a slate recently on the college basketball side that had 3 players that were out and did not have any like injury designations on DraftKings, but if you just looked at the starting lineup, you would know that, and they still got ownership. So perhaps there'll be some players who are out that get some ownership there, but try to jam Horvath, Robinson, and Hawkins into your lineup. Jacob Jordan at 1.6K as a value look there. That's how I would approach it. All right, Birmingham Bowl here, Georgia Tech versus Vanderbilt. Let's start with those opt-outs. On the Georgia Tech side, Zach Piron, the touchdown stealing vulture that he is. They run that CFL offense when he's there, not around, as he is committed to Minnesota. Minnesota doing things in the transfer portal, so we don't have to worry about him much. We get the full meal deal when it comes to Haynes King, who's priced at 8.3K, which is a very agreeable price to use him here. Definitely have interest when I look at some of the projected ownership, which is going to be all over the board, but just getting an idea of who's going to be highly owned. There isn't going to be a lot of love for Haynes King, so a nice GPP look here for him at 8.3. I think he's going to get a chance to rush for over 100 yards here, just with kind of the way that I expect this game to go. He is going to be missing his top receiver in Eric Singleton, who has transferred. He's going to Auburn. Auburn retooling a bit. Cam Coleman, our guy. That's a pretty tough one. Malik Rutherford has decided to transfer as well. So, some of his top options and even depth pieces such as Leo Blackburn, Christian Leary, all of those receivers hitting the transfer portal. Some of the guys who have decided to transfer, like Bowling Green's Terrion Stewart, they decided to play in that game. He was horrible. But a lot of them that have transferred out, if they haven't committed yet, that's still a opportunity for them to come back and play. Obviously, if they've committed, like Singleton, then you'll know they're not going to play whatsoever. Running back wise, Jamal Haynes is priced at just 5.9K. He is going to be a relatively popular option on this slate, and that's why Haynes King's probably not. You guys know all season long we've been pretty adamant about builds that include the quarterback and the running back. Haynes isn't necessarily a big-time pass catcher. He did have 4 receptions a couple of weeks ago. It's NC State, 2 against Georgia, so he definitely does do those things. But majority of the time when you're rostering him, you're hoping for those 15-plus carries, that 100-plus yard game. I think the price probably pushes us towards him, especially in single entry. But I do really like Haynes King, and I think he's going to steal a lot of that yardage totals away from him. The YPC for Haynes lately hasn't been particularly great. Did have 83 yards on 3 carries against Miami. That's going to do great for your YPC, but under 3 in 3 of those last 5 games. Basically losing yardage to King, Piron. We've seen a little bit of Chad Alexander, especially recently. He got a pretty decent workload against Georgia. So, he's taken some work away from him as well. Could be one of those spots where it's so obvious, maybe you just get away and fade. As far as the receivers go here, 3.8K for Avery Boyd. I don't think you want any Georgia Tech receivers. I think that's pretty tough to get there to them. On the Vanderbilt side, the opt-outs there, Nate Johnson, who is kind of a combo player. You're not going to know much about him. Injuries to A.J. Newberry, who's more of a backup anyways. Tyler Fortenberry, a tight end 3, is in the transfer portal. And then a bunch of defensive linemen who are pretty important to Vanderbilt. So a little bit of a defensive exodus here for Vandy. That's going to be a problem. Offensively, though, they'll have majority of their guys, and that being Diego Pavia, Eli Stowers, their top tight end, and their secondary. So Vanderbilt's in a good spot here overall in terms of they've had way less opt-outs, at least relevant opt-outs, than Georgia Tech has had. Pavia's there at 6'1". He's been relatively cheap all year long. The win over Bama that he led them to, that kind of solidified his status. The court case that happened with the JUCO stuff, like Pavia maybe playing some more collegiate football than we weren't sure of. Not that intrigued by him, but Georgia Tech is a fantasy-friendly unit. I do think Pavia could have a nice rushing total here. Definitely going to be a prop on Pavia that I'm looking at pretty heavily, but overall for DFS purposes, outside of having from value there at 6'1" to open up some things, I'm not really all that excited about him. He's been solid. but he hasn't been putting up those huge games. But at 6'1", giving us a 20, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's going to definitely be upside for more. Now, I do like our guy, Jay Kuchek's favorite, Cedric Alexander, sitting there at 4K. I think we see 20-plus touches for him pretty easily. Opportunity to score a touchdown here, get a couple of receptions perhaps. Definitely my preferred Vanderbilt play at 4K. I do think he's going to do some damage here, at least just have volume. And then receivers-wise, a tight end, Eli Stowers, only 3.9K. Definitely some good value there. All season long, we have looked to value tight ends where it makes sense. This is definitely one that does. He wasn't particularly great against Tennessee or LSU lately, and maybe that keeps his ownership down. But when they get into the red zone, he definitely has a high touchdown equity compared to the other pass catchers on this team. All right, betting wise on that one, I don't hate the call there on Georgia Tech -3. This isn't one that I am like super confident one way or another on a side. I do like the over 50.5 for what it's worth. We've been doing fairly decent on totals. And then let's go in here and see. Pavia rushing yards prop on FanDuel is 46.5 at -114. I do like him to hit that over. I like Cedric Alexander to also go over 54.5. I think Vanderbilt's going to do very well running the football in this one. Jamal Haynes' prop is at 67.5. That one I kind of lean towards the under here just because I think Haynes King is going to steal. He has an alt yards prop. Let's see. His all rushing prop at 50 plus, 60 plus. So 50 plus is -240, 60 plus at -158. That one I don't mind there. Doing a couple of alt props there. I don't know that he has a huge 100-yard game, but I do think he hits into 60 just because of the projected volume he's going to get, at least efficiency-wise speaking. I think both teams are going to want to assert themselves in the running game there, and I want to lean heavily on that aspect of the game for them. All right, let's get rid of that. Moving on to the next one here, we have the Liberty Bowl between Texas Tech and Arkansas, total of 52.5. Texas Tech -2. It is 50-50 in the big news here. Taj Brooks, who has been a brand favorite for us for years, 50-50 to play. He is, as of Christmas, 2 days before Christmas, the RB1 on the depth chart, but the latest on Twitter is that he may not go. If he does go, he may not play the full game. It's a lot of salary at 9.7K. But the swan song for him, there's no Baron Morton, he's due to shoulder surgery, so he's just not going to be playing, right? So there is a value piece there in Hammond at 6'4", who has shown a little bit week 9 at TCU. He was a capable passer, but this was just a huge game if Taj Brooks does go because of the fact that Morton's not there. Josh Kelly is going to be out. He's preparing for the NFL draft. We've seen some guys who have entered the draft decide to play this final game to get some, final film on tape, final highlights, if you will. Kelly is not going to do that. He has been a big piece to the puzzle. 89 receptions, over 1,000 yards. He has been the absolute stud of the team. They do have some other options to look to. Let's go through the opt-out list here for Texas Tech. They're both of their backup quarterbacks outside of him and also hitting the transfer portal. Cameron Valdez, who has been hurt since the very beginning of the year. As far as the opt-outs, Josh Kelly, the only real important one there, Micah Hudson and Jordan Brown have both transferred, and Micah Hudson's very talented. I would have thought this was a great game for him to show out, but he has decided to take his services elsewhere. And then they will be missing 3 to 4 major pieces to the offensive line, which isn't great for the running game there. But Taj Brooks is a different animal. He's a different beast. So it's really going to come down to, as long as he is a go, we want to definitely use him. If he doesn't play, or it's news that he's going to be limited, we have a look to Jacoby Williams, who's priced there at 3.2, getting him 10 plus carries. I think that's a pretty interesting type look. They don't really have anyone else in the backfield that they can rely upon, especially with Cameron Dickey dealing with a questionable tag himself. So we'll keep an eye on that news. But as long as Brooks is a go, I do want to find a way to pay up for him. On the Arkansas side, Taylon Green is full steam ahead for Taylon Green. They're revamping this offense. They've lost a lot to the portal. That is why Texas Tech is the favorite, but it's only 2 points. If this was a situation where Arkansas was playing maybe a lesser of a team, I think we'd see them be or a better team than Texas Tech, excuse me. I think we'd see Arkansas like plus 10. The fact that Texas Tech is only 2-point favorites when Arkansas has lost like pretty much every relevant piece is very interesting. This is a game that we definitely want to look to Taylon Green. And looking at the context of the slate and what people are going to roster, we can expect Green to be one of the top highest owned quarterbacks on the slate, along with Will Hammond on the other side for Texas Tech. This is going to be a game, offensively speaking, that we see a ton of points scored. 52.5 is the total, but I think it does sail over that. So this is another one of those totals that we can confidently and comfortably take the over. 7.3K is a fair and reasonable price for Taylon Green. Might even say that's a little bit under. Has rushed for 521 yards this year, 7 touchdowns. He's also thrown for over 2,800 yards. 13 touchdowns, been picked off 9 times. We'll have to work on those mistakes going into the next season. This will be a great opportunity for him to end the year on a positive note. Certainly love Taylon Green there at that price. The opt-outs on the side of Arkansas, let's get that opened up here. Mike Hudson, by the way, a former 5-star recruit. Was really looking forward to seeing him. All right, we have an injury to Braylon Russell, so he'll be questionable on the running back side. Rashad Dabinian is in the transfer portal. We've seen him a bunch of times getting the call there whenever there's been injuries in the running back room. He's officially doubtful, so I think we would be unlikely to see him. Javon Jackson is not in the portal, but he has declared Quinton Jackson, and he is likely not going to need to get any more film. So we won't see him either. Would have said Braylon Russell is a great play there at 3K. We saw him rush for 175 yards back in week 9, but he has been dealing with a ton of stresses, whether that's injuries or transfer portal drama. He had decided to transfer a couple of weeks ago, had withdrawn and come back, still dealing with the injury ailment, but it sounds like there's a good chance he plays. And if he does, I do like him at 3K there. The other player being Rodney Hill, who doesn't do a whole lot of anything exciting. No disrespect to Rodney, but he would be one of the last men standing potentially there with how that one breaks out. But we could see a lot of Taylon Green on the ground in this one. Otherwise, Braylon Russell is a name we want to definitely study going into the slate. Now, this slate is kind of different. 12:30 East or 12:30 Pacific time it starts. And we don't have another game until 4, 5, and 7:30. So it's a late one. So we'll have plenty of time to marinate, stew, and go through message boards and kind of get some news here and really talk through these different lineup options that we have. The receiver opt-outs, Andrew Armstrong, who is had a monstrous season here, going to go into the NFL draft. Now, Arkansas is going to be bringing in some pretty big talent via the transfer portal at this position, and we saw Armstrong come in and really dominate, and we will see Arkansas receivers be fantasy relevant for a long, long time here with this current staff and Taylon Green at quarterback. So no Andrew Armstrong, who is Taylon Green's #1 target. Isaiah Satania has also decided to transfer, so he will not be there. Luke Haas, the tight end with touchdown equity, he has transferred out, so he will not be there either. A lot of missing pieces. Tyrone Broden is officially doubtful. He has not played for several weeks. There is no real chance that he plays either. I would be very surprised. So a lot of guys out here, not a lot of weapons left over. A naked Taylon Green against Texas Tech makes a lot of sense because of his dual threat upside. But we're definitely going to have some playability here. Let's pull up Arkansas's target share here. Because if you followed any kind of bowl season stuff throughout, it hasn't been as much this year, but in the past, guys stepping up and having huge games seemingly out of nowhere. Now, we did see Matthew Coleman for San Jose State really break out in a big way. He is going to be the next Nick Nash. We kind of talked about that a little bit. And you see players like that, if you can get a beat on, a read on, that one made sense. Justin Lockhart was getting blanketed. We kind of thought that would happen. Didn't get so much Coleman myself, but that's the type of play in bowl season that you can really get a read on and make some things happen. So for Arkansas, Armstrong, led the team with targets, 119. Satania, 55. Broden, 43. And Haas, 32. Tesla as well with 31. You throw all those out, you don't really have anybody who stepped up. The running backs were the next three in targets with Dominion and Jaquin and Jackson with 15 plus each. Do have some tight ends to possibly look at here, but this is a pretty tough one. We're going to have to do some additional research and kind of look through the game day media, beat writers, see what we're kind of thinking for the various options here that are remaining, because it is a great overall matchup for them against this Texas Tech defense. We know that they have been a sieve when it comes to fantasy goodness, and there's going to be a lot. Secondary receivers that didn't play a lot, Jaden Wilson, Cameron Bibby, all of those guys as well have hit the transfer portal. We did see Andreas Paskey flash in his 2-touchdown game in Week 9 against Mississippi State when they had other injuries. So those are some of the names to kind of be aware of. But all day, Taylon Green, paying attention to the news there on Taj Brooks and what we might be able to potentially get out of a min-price Braylon Russell. All right, moving on here, we have the Holiday Bowl, Syracuse versus Washington State. It's a total of 59.5. Syracuse 17.5-point favorites. We've seen some pretty close spreads for the majority of the early part of the bowl season, but Syracuse, huge favorites. It makes me uncomfortable personally, but when you look at the opt-outs and injuries, Syracuse is very well off and should have the majority of their relevant players. And that is why they're having to give so many points because of that. And when it's not the case on the Washington State side, who sees their coach move on, John Mateer going into the transfer portal, which was to be expected. Jake Dickert, their coach, going to Wake Forest. Their top offensive lineman gone. Their top linebacker gone. Their top cornerback gone. So there's a lot of different options that are just out the door for Washington State as they go through a bunch of changes. The most relevant for DFS purposes being John Mateer, their quarterback, Wayshawn Parker, the young running back who has a lot of talent, and Chris Hudson and Trey Shackelford at the wide receiver spots. So we're going to see a lot of Syracuse stacks on this slate, and makes sense. Kyle McCord will be one of, if not the highest owned quarterback on the slate. Still feel pretty uncomfortable paying $9K for him. If Jake were here, he would tell you the same. But as it comes to and pertains to raw points, there will be no better option on a 4-game slate than McCord. We know he can get picked off with reckless abandon, but to be fair here, he has thrown no interceptions in his last 4 games. He has fumbled 3 times, but no real turnovers, hasn't lost any of those, so he's cleaned it up. Of course, that was against the likes of Virginia Tech, BC, Cal, and UConn. Cal was pretty decent, and then the game against Miami there where they knocked Miami out of the playoff. 42-38 win. He was fairly perfect in that one. 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, 470 and 2 against UConn. You can see McCord wants to end this year on a high note. Over 4,300 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 3 rushing touchdowns. Negative yardage because he gets sacked all the time, especially in the early going, but you can expect him to have a ton of rostership, and I don't mind that whatsoever. And this will be a situation where the industry, they're typically, still kind of archaic, right? We get the quarterback, running back combos at low rostership all the time. This will not be one of those situations. Everybody and their mom on this 4-game slate will roster Kyle McCord, and they will pair him with LaQuint Allen. The top 2 backups for him are out. Will Nixon has been out since week 5. We haven't seen much of him. And the running game has just really consistently been LaQuint Allen. We've seen a bit of Yasin Willis here or there, not enough to really matter. We've seen some spot carries and late in games from others, but this is just the all LaQuint Allen show. Expect 20-plus carries, 25 plus touches when you consider the fact that he gets heavily targeted. 6, 5, 3, 5, and 5 receptions over his last 5 games gives him a ton of viability. Similar to Desmond Reed, who as a chalk piece today just completely broke the slate. You'd expect 30 plus fantasy points for Reed, especially when they're rolling a walk-on quarterback in the first half. That was brutal. LaQuint Allen is definitely going to have a really big game here, 8.6K. It's a lot of salary to invest in McCord and LaQuint Allen, but we have those cheapy options on the Arkansas side. We have a cheapy options on the Vanderbilt side. We can definitely make this work with what we have available to us on the slate and in the last game, which has a ton of opt-outs and injuries as well. Receivers-wise, Umari Hatcher has decided to hit the portal. The other opt-outs here, Zeke Haynes, although he's injured, not opting out, I suppose, but it sounds like he may transfer. Hatcher's still dealing with a leg issue. He had flirted with the portal as well. I don't think we're going to see him play, but we'll see if he dresses. They still have Trevor Pena, Joe Jackson Meeks, Orande Gadsden, Justice Robinson, Vince. They have some really good targets here from Kyle McCord. Now they're spendy, so it might not be possible. Pena at 6K especially, who's been just absolutely ridiculous this season when healthy. I like Gadsden quite a bit at 5'6". It seems like the industry maybe forgot about him the last few weeks. They weren't on the slate against UConn. He had low rostership against Cal. He wasn't that owned against Miami. People just really kind of forgetting about the hot start that he had. And overall, Gadsden has been fantastic this year. 68 catches, 848 yards, and 5 touchdowns. It's the year of the tight end. The year of the tight end. Truly, Harold Fannin, shout out to you for breaking all those records today. Meeks, who started out very cheap, he has kind of ascended his way towards the second in the pecking order here for pass catchers. And then Justice Robin Simmons there at 3.3K. Hasn't had the volume, but he is a big play threat. We've seen a ton of big plays from him. Catches of 55, 40, 32, and 23 this season. He did start off very hot his first game after getting healthy, 488 and 2 against Virginia Tech. At 3.3, it's worth a shot. I definitely think he is going to have an opportunity to break one. You're just going to have to really hope that he connects on that, whatever that break play is going to be, because he's just not going to get a ton of volume. All those targets are going to basically go to Pena, Meeks, and Gadsden. On the Cougar side here, if it's not Mateer, which is not, he's transferring to Oklahoma, which would be interesting. I bet Oklahoma wishes they could throw him in a jersey tomorrow, huh? A lot of things in the pecking order to determine with all of these transfers. So that means, a very expensive price, Zevi Eckhouse at 10-2. Don't particularly love having to pay those kinds of prices. Brady McKellar, who operated as the QB3, he's in the transfer portal as well. Really just a tough situation here to look at any quarterback for the Cougars. Running backs, definitely more interested, especially with Wayshawn Parker gone. I believe he's headed to Utah. Leo Palasi has shown a toughness. His best game coming in week 12 against New Mexico, 3 receptions, 10 carries, 58 yards, is 3.3K. So again, somebody that we can look to for some value. At least it's going to get some touches. You also have Devenzi Slinebacker, who has had 30 plus carries this season. Best game in week 11 against Utah State. He had 10 carries, 26 yards. Again, there's going to be some volume for some of these cheaper running backs. Because of the quarterback play there without Mateer, it's going to be tough. We always like to roster a Cougars wide receiver on most slates, but I don't know that this is going to be one of those slates. Couldn't imagine paying up for Kyle Williams at 7.4, who I do believe is going to play. We mentioned Chris Hudson hitting the transfer portal there. I believe he is going to Arizona. So no Chris Hudson. Josh Meredith has also hit the transfer portal. He was going back and forth about that decision, but as it stands right now, he's not set to play. Also seeing Cooper Mathers get some chatter. He did show flashes in his little bit of time. A long touchdown against Hawaii, long touchdown against SDSU. 50-yard grab against New Mexico. So definitely somewhat interesting if he plays as well. But just no confidence there, really. Cougars, I think, are going to go extremely under-owned by the masses, as they probably should. But there's definitely going to be some viability here for some of the players. And I think Leo Palasi at 3.3 is probably our best bet, just because of the volume aspect there. Don't know if the YPC or much efficiency is going to be involved, but at 3.3, if he can get to 15 touches, maybe even more, should be able to see him maybe snake a touchdown, at the very least 70 plus yards, maybe a couple of receptions, and just kind of get us to value there. to be able to open some things up. All right, the next one, betting wise on that one, I don't love the total because I don't know that the Cougars are going to score much. So I'm probably leaning towards the under 59.5. I hate the big spreads. Not really a big fan of those, especially in a year where football has been as competitive as competitive balance can be for a year because of the transfer portal parity. I don't love this one. So it's probably going to be more of a no bet there. It might be a live situation that we can look to. And props wise, we definitely want to consider. In fact, let's go on the prop screen here for the Syracuse game. FanDuel is not even offering anything in the prop market. And DraftKings lately has been absolutely awful with their offerings. I hate that they have taken away the over and unders so much. So because so many people are out, DK is not even offering props on most of those situations. So that makes sense. We'll take a look at Prize Picks and Underdog, see if we can get it that way. But Syracuse definitely loading up in the DFS side, but not as much on the betting side. Las Vegas Bowl will take us home on the Friday slate. This is between Texas A&M and USC. Total of 52. The Aggies are -4. Tell you off top, I definitely like the Aggies to win this game. Let's start with the opt-outs. The beginning of the season, all the chatter, the hype about Connor Wegman. Obviously, things didn't work out. Marcel Reed has won the gig outright, so he's gone. We know that. Lev Moss injured. Cyrus Allen has hit the transfer portal as a receiver. Came into it from La Tech as a really exciting weapon, but just never really panned out too much there. Micah Teese and Jacob Bostic also transferring out. But for the most part, the Aggies have some really good options. Reed sitting there at just 6.4K. A lot of viability there. If you wouldn't be as trusting in Will Hammond for Texas Tech, for example, definitely like Reed, especially against a USC team that you can do some things against every year. USC's defense is improved every year. That's what people say. And every year they do the opposite. So we know that there is going to be some guys out. He should definitely find some running lanes against this USC team. This has been one that we've been able to target running backs against and mobile quarterbacks. And this is a really nice look here for Marcel Reed, especially if more are going to kind of gravitate towards the Arkansas Texas Tech stacks, which is definitely a play. No doubt about that. But I think Marcel Reed is a really nice look here. On the running back side without Moss, we know Amari Daniels at 4.5 makes a lot of sense, but he's just not going to get, even regardless, very few bell cow-esque opportunities. He did have 27 carries against Auburn, generated just 90 yards on those at 3.3, but he's been solid. He is scoring touchdowns, which is keeping his value pretty high here at 4.5, has that equity. I don't know that we see a 25 carry game for him here, but the matchup is definitely good enough. And this is a spot where I don't mind going Reed and Daniels to save some money so that we can go ahead and get some of those more expensive Syracuse options that we want to get to. Looking at the way that the slate is, I think Daniels kind of falls behind Haynes, who I expect to be really, really popular. And then the same game for USC, a min-price running back that we're going to talk about in a second. And then depending on how that Taj Brooks news breaks. So Daniels and Reed are looking like they're going a little bit overlooked, which is an opportunity for us to really take advantage. Receiver-wise, they're all cheap. It's kind of been the case most of the season. I've always liked Jabre Barber. He's kind of fallen off lately. The rushing upside of Reed has kind of the reliance on the running game has led to some pretty low-end outputs here. Jade Walker at 3.2 has major upside. We did see that in the game against Auburn. He has flashed at times, so definitely interested there. Terry Bussey as a future piece. A lot of chatter for him. They're working him into the game throughout. He's been getting carries. He's been getting work on the slot. They've really been scheming to get him the rock. This is the type of player you see break out in a bowl game. This could be the Matthew Coleman play here with Terry Bussey. So keep that in mind when you're looking for some of these, kind of overlooked, underutilized plays that have a chance to really break out in a bowl game. And then at 3.5, you had Noah Thomas, which is certainly fine. He's been steady. Looks like he's a full go as well. Looking at some of the projected ownerships here, potentially for receivers. Yeah, nobody on Texas A&M really going to be drawing much interest at all. So if you're running multiple entries, large field GPPs, this is a game to definitely get some exposure to. On the USC side, it's dire. Lots of players out, but that's okay. We don't mind. The starts with Miller Moss, who's transferred out. Woody Marks opting out because he is going to pursue his NFL dreams. Quentin Joyner, who did hit the transfer portal and landed somewhere. I can't remember off top where he landed, but he is gone. Kieran Hudson has transferred out. Zachariah Branch has transferred out. Deuce Robinson, the tight end wide receiver hybrid that I love so much, he's gone as well. And they're tight end 3, Cade Eldridge. So a lot of weapons gone. The 7.2K price for Jaden Maivia is pretty solid. He's another, like, this game in general just feels like the masses are going to overlook it. Really like Maivia. He was excellent last year. This season, didn't get the starting job over Miller Moss. They made a change in week 12. Led them to the 28-20 win over Nebraska, 259-3, solid 28 DK points. UCLA, a little tougher, did lead them to a win, 19-13. Bruins games have been horrible this year, so not a great score for him there. He got sacked a bunch of times, but he did throw for 221 and a touchdown on 35 attempts, and then the 48 attempts there against Notre Dame. And they gave Notre Dame's defense hell. 49-35 finished, a loss there. They gave up a ton to Notre Dame. Again, their rush defense is horrible, so Notre Dame took advantage of that. But he was very poised, 360 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also rushed 5 times and got a couple of touchdowns there. 3 rushing touchdowns in the 3 games that he started. I definitely like him at 7.2K. I don't think he would make it into a single entry build for me or my main lineup because I do have an affinity for Reed. And I don't know that I want to stack the quarterbacks in this game just yet. But Maivia is not getting nearly enough attention, and he really should be because he could easily put up a 30-plus fantasy point game here. We're talking sub 10% rostership. That is just way too good to pass up on some exposure. In the running back room, it is announced that Brian Jackson will get to start. So there's your 3K running back that everybody's going to have. Did rush for 71 yards on 6 carries against Notre Dame, so showed some serious pop in that game against a tough Notre Dame defense. The Aggies have some defensive dudes as well, but you're talking about a min-price running back who's going to get volume. No-brainer. Don't really have to sell you on that play whatsoever. Jacoby Lane at 5.7. Just okay. I think you see Mekhi Lemon with all these opt-outs and transfers and injuries galore. I think Mekhi Lemon is the one at 5.2K that sees the majority of the ownership here for USC pass catchers, especially coming off just an absolute monster game against Notre Dame, 9 catches for 133 yards. He's really kind of ascended towards the top there. A lot of people thought Kieran Hudson was going to be the guy, but Hudson, ever since about week 8, maybe week 9 there when he broke out against Rutgers, he has been the highest upside player on the team that wasn't named Woody Marks. So definitely don't mind Mekhi Lemon either. And he has clearly established a relationship with Maivia. Some of his better performances there, 9 for 133. The first one against Nebraska, not so well, but he's definitely got a connection there. And I don't mind having a bit of a USC mini stack in this one. So that closes out the 4-game Friday slate. A core for me there. Hard to get away from Taylon Green. I think I got to follow the chalk there on Taylon Green, the price of 7.3, knowing that he's going to be able to do some serious damage. This is shaping up to be a 2-quarterback slate. If you're new to the show, we are big proponents of 4 running backs. It works way more than it doesn't. But these bowl slates, especially the last couple of days, have been more towards the 2-quarterback build, the more traditional quarterback build. So I am looking at that. But anyways, Taylon Green as they core there. The 3K running back from USC, Brian Jackson. Again, chalky, but sometimes it's just that easy. And then the wide receiver spot is where you can really kind of get different because I'm seeing a ton of Syracuse receivers there getting taken. I do want to get some more clarity on the Arkansas situation. Isaac Tesla at 3.4K would make a ton of sense there. Perhaps even Monte Harrison, who's there at 3K. Maybe we can get a little bit of love there. Andrew Paskey, who has shown some flash. He is priced at 5.5, so not as great, but do want to pair up Taylon Green, I feel, with one of those receivers. Right now, we'll go Isaac Tesla until further notice. So that'll be the core group that we go with. And you're saving a ton of amount of money, so you can pick the pay up receivers from Syracuse that you want, and perhaps you can even go up and get Kyle McCord at 9K without really having to bat an eye. The real pay up is Taj Brooks, though. Taj Brooks and LaQuint Allen, we can get both of those guys in with these values and feel pretty damn good about it. All right, let's move on to the Friday slate. Let's get that out of here. And we'll open up the chat. Hey. Joey McGuire with the 50-50 Colin Tosh starting tomorrow. Yeah, man. Like, just being trying to show some gamemanship, one-upsmanship there and really just mess with the opposing team. It's really no secret to these guys at this point. Like, they know there's a heavy amount of betting going on in these games. I'm sure a lot of them have heard of DFS at this point, prop betting, all that stuff. So dropping the 50-50 call on Tosh Brooks is just a total dick move. It's very Lane Kiffin-ish, I will say. All right, moving on. We are going to start with this UConn and North Carolina showdown. It is the Fenway Bowl, total of 52.5. North Carolina 2.5-point favorites. Starting with opt-outs, Darrell Robinson has transferred. Love Darrell Robinson, but he is gone. Skylar Bell deciding to transfer again, third time in 3 seasons. Hey, it's a system. Brock Montgomery as well, and Nick Evers, who is injured, is officially questionable. So those are the UConn opt-outs. Quarterback can be pretty dire when they have to go to Joe Fagnano, which is going to be the case. He threw 48 times against Syracuse, 41 against Temple. You'd think, wow, guy's throwing almost 50 times. He must put up a huge score. You would be wrong. Joe had 11.5 against Temple. We're talking about Temple. And then against Syracuse in a game that UConn very nearly won. He threw for 228 and 2, but just 16.4. So you know what, Joe? Priced in the captain spot at 14.1. Very good matchup against North Carolina, but get GTFO. If you're watching with your kids right now, get out with that price of Joe Fagnano, because that is absolutely ludicrous. You don't have to worry about Darrell Robinson. He's transferred out. He's going to Auburn. I keep telling you, Auburn is loading up, man. Auburn has the juice. Going to love Auburn next year. So he's out of there. It does leave Cam Edwards to probably handle a fairly decent workload. You rushed for 142 yards in their last game against UMass. He's had some pretty big games this year sharing the workload with Darrell, but now I would expect him to get 20-plus touches, especially when your quarterback is Joe Fagnano. You want the running back to touch the ball as much as possible. Wide receivers without Skylar Bell, who I would really be surprised. I mean, I don't know that he's got a new location yet, but I would be surprised if he played. You do have TJ Sheffield, who's extremely expensive. Just an okay option if he was cheaper. If you really want a UConn option at the receiver spot, Josiah Gathings is cheap, offers you a little bit of juice there, but mainly just looking to the Cam Edwards play. I do think UConn has a chance to win this game, but I don't know how. Statistically speaking, it's going to be horrible, but UConn definitely could win. On the North Carolina side, Connor Harrell transferred out. Max Johnson, as you know, injured. Running backs, Caleb Hood has hit the transfer portal. Omarion Hampton did opt out, which there's a ton of running backs who are looking to be out of this game, so it's going to be a little bit dicey there. Hampton, prepping for the NFL draft, so don't expect to see him. Darwin Barlow has a non-0% chance of playing, but it would be very surprising. With Hood transferring, that kind of leaves Charleston French, who's a reasonable price there, sub 3K, just 2.4. had some work against FSU, had a touchdown back in week 3 against NC Central. So maybe if you're playing this, if you're a true DGen playing some UConn versus North Carolina showdown, Davion Gauss has gotten at least 5 carries in 4 of his last 5 at the running back spot. So you could definitely do worse there. Jacoby Criswell at almost 11K. Definitely more of the known commodity there with the running back situation up in the air. You can almost just have one of those easy builds. UConn running back, North Carolina passing game here, all the excitement for Coach Belichick. North Carolina is going to be rolling out the system that most teams are going to need to go to in basketball and college football, where you have a head coach to run and his staff to run the game planning, the practices, the development, all of that stuff. And then you have a GM and his staff who is just strictly out there trying to make moves, trying to Jerry Maguire it, trying to show me the money, get players in, get the right pieces for this roster. There's going to have to be a separation. We saw that with Coach Jim Larinaga, who's decided to step away from Miami on the basketball side because he just can't keep up. They have the NIL money to sign as much players as they want. People find out the hard way. You can't just take a bunch of ball dominant players and throw them together and think it's going to work. Larinaga benefited a couple of years ago from this system, paying Nigel Pack nearly $1 million to make them have a Final Four run, and now suddenly it's not working, so he's going to go. Separation of GM and head coaching powers. That is the future of college sports, and you're going to have to see that separation. And you're going to see that with North Carolina. Coach Belichick is really going to hardline game planning, and then they're going to have a GM team. But really, he's just going to be there for like a handful of seasons, if that, and he's going to hand that job over to his son. That is the real play here. As far as the receivers go for North Carolina, John Koppenheimer is there at 1.8K as the kind of the last tight end standing. I do like him. The person that gets the UNC receiver right, and this one is going to win all the money. That could be Nate McCollum, who's priced at 5K. That could be Kobe Paysour, who's priced at 4.8K. All of them have shown flashes. The highest priced at 8.4 is J.J. Jones, but he has not had really that many big games. Week 9 against Virginia, 5 for 129. Doesn't warrant paying that price for him over McCollum, Kobe Paysour, Koppenheimer. Like it's just there isn't the right stuff there in his logs and the games that he's played, if you watched any North Carolina games, to warrant paying that price for him. This is a very ugly and brutal showdown. It's yet another one. If it was on the slate, it probably would be relatively light on it. But I do really love the captain spot there for Cam Edwards. I think he's going to have a pretty nice game. All right. Betting wise, there's another one is 52.5. A lot of these 50, 52 totals. Slight lean towards the under. I don't want to bet every single game just to bet it. We did it today and it worked. But I do like the UConn money line side for that one too, if you're looking for a bet. Don't like Fagnano will throw for 150 and 3 interceptions, but UConn could win this game. Trust me. All right, Pinstripe Bowl. Let's get this showdown out of my face. Pinstripe Bowl, Boston College versus Nebraska. Total of 45.5. Brutal total. And Nebraska as a 4-point favorite. Let's talk about opt-outs. Thomas Castellanos, he hit the portal there, or he stepped away from the team, but portaling out of there a couple of weeks ago. That left us with the Grayson James experience. He was pretty solid, honestly, the last few weeks to end the season. They did win against Pittsburgh with James. They did win against North Carolina with James. So he's been solid. Priced there at 6.6K. Nebraska defensively, they have some chops. They are definitely a physical team. I don't love the idea of playing the Boston College side here, especially at the quarterback spots. Other opt-outs, Jaden McGowan and Jerron Bradley at the wide receiver spot. Alex Broom and Jaden Skeet are both dealing with injuries. Broom is out. We know that. Jaden Skeet is highly questionable. The running back spot, Turbo Richard, the aptly name, as they say in the Discord, Turbo Dick, if you will, has not been playing. Very good young talent. This would be the exact type of player that if he is good to go in the bowl game, that I could see putting up a huge huge game. But as it stands right now, we are expecting normal run for Kai Robichaux, normal run for Jordan McDonald. And then we've kind of seen Treshaun Ward fall out of favor, miss some games, only 8 carries in their last 2. So, can kind of look there. But again, this Nebraska matchup, it's not great for anyone on the offensive side. Lewis Bond had a nice connection with Thomas Castellanos, but he had an even better connection with Grayson James. 9 for 81 against North Carolina, 5 for 54 against Pitt. He's been really cheap for most of the season, priced there at 5.2K. Definitely don't hate the idea. If you want a touchdown call, as long as he's playing, I believe he is, Kamari Morales, the primary tight end there, 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Has been really just a consistent. When I was playing the underdog, the drafts they were doing, the daily, weekly drafts, Morales was a tight end I found myself taking a lot, and he kind of came through more often than not. He's not putting up Tyler Warren, Harold Fannin scores, but he's giving you 12 to 15 fantasy points more often than not. He's pretty much the most playable option for BC against this tough Nebraska squad. Now, Nebraska is doing some serious work in the portal. They are bringing in really, really high-end talent to the wide receiver spot, especially, and they're going to be very, very good. I think you're going to see a noticeable improvement in their offense next year. I think we can say that about Nebraska every year, and every year we've been disappointed. But they have guys I like. Opt-out wise, Dante Dattle, he has transferred. He's headed to Kentucky. Gabe Irvin and Riker Evans both transferring out as well. Isaiah Nair has decided to opt out, so Nair will not be playing in this one from what I've seen. Malachi Coleman, talented, but he hit the transfer portal as well. So some decent depth pieces out of here for Nebraska. Dylan Raiola remains super cheap at 5'6". He's really not been playable at any point, except maybe like the beginning of the year when we were so hyped on him and all the, oh my God, this true freshman getting to start. He's gone through some serious growing pains. He is getting a ton of passing volume, 32, 38, 38, 27, and 32 over the last 5 games. So the volume is there, but the touchdowns, they just haven't been there. He's thrown for over 2,500 yards, 12 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, no touchdowns on the ground. He has been sacked a metric F-ton, minus 68 yards on the year. Definitely going to need to see some improvements. He wants to look the part. He wants to dress and look and act like Patty Mahomes. We're going to need to see that on the field. I think he's playable at 5'6" here against BC, though. This is a much too big of a slate to really be using him in anywhere near your single entry, high dollar main lineup stuff, but I think it's worth a shot taking some Raiola shares here in large field GBPs. At running back, without Irvin and Dowdle, that kind of shrinks things down. This has been a crowded running back room for a long time. Emmett Johnson really came alive there the last couple of games. Early December here, he was flirting with the transfer portal, talking about going. Once it got out there that Dowdle and some others were going to leave, he decided to come back. 3 straight games over 15 DK points to end the season against the likes of Iowa, Wisconsin, and USC. So Emmett Johnson definitely has some high upside there, even at the 5.4 price. Earlier in the season, he was a big-time pass catcher, and we didn't expect him to get a ton of carries because of guys like Dowdle. And then he kind of fell off. But the last 3 games, 6, 7, and 6 receptions in each of those last 3, in addition to the 10-plus carries, 20-plus touches for Emmett Johnson. Have to definitely like him there. Dropped down to 3.6 for Ramir Johnson. He's another pretty solid pass-catching back. Not getting the workload that Emmett was, but with those other 2 gone now, he should definitely be at least a little in consideration. With Nair out, it does make Jamal Banks and Ja'Cory Barney as the top 2 wideouts. It's pretty wild to see Ja'Cory Barney priced at 5.1. I have an affinity for Barney early on in the season, kind of rostered him more than I probably should have and more than anyone else in the industry. He's a guy that they like to get carries to. He works out a slot. They put him in a position to succeed. Not too crazy about his potential workload next year with the additions at wide receiver they've already made in the transfer portal. But I do like Barney. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, like he usually is in the mid 3K range, priced at 5.1. Makes it tougher to use him on this large slate. But this is another one of those players in a bowl game situation where maybe the grinders, the true D-gens like ourselves and Nebraska fans know who he is, but the rest of the public doesn't. This would be a good game for him to kind of introduce himself to the rest of the country. Banks is only 3-3. It's kind of weird seeing him as that cheap price. He's been pretty much as consistent as anyone on the team. Definitely playable there. And then Tommy Fadon at 3-1, the tight end. He's been kind of a safety valve there for Raiola. Do like the betting side here for Nebraska of -4. The total's a no bet for me because that one I could see going either way, but I do like Nebraska there, -4 and outright. All right, next game here, we're going to be talking about the New Mexico Bowl. Louisiana versus TCU. It's a total of 58.5. God, I said I wasn't going to do a 2-hour show. What are we at? Now, we got to go a lot faster than this, Alex. TCU 11.5 point favorites. Total 58.5. Going to see some points here. We love it after seeing all these low 50 totals. Tons of injuries at the quarterback spot for Louisiana. That's been the case pretty much throughout the season. They've gone to Chandler Fields, especially lately. He's now officially questionable. Ben Woolrich, who missed a chunk of games there towards the end. Now it seems with his collarbone issue, he's got it under control. So we're going to probably see him in the game against TCU. This is a great matchup against that TCU defense that tends to be fantasy friendly. But, man, with the injury tags, there's a chance they might both play. I just don't know that we can get to these Louisiana guys. So we're going to tread carefully there. Running backs wise, Draylon Washington has hit the transfer portal, and then we have a few receivers either injured or opting out. Harvey Broussard did hit the portal. Robert Williams is questionable with the injury, and then Trayvon Colbert has decided to transfer, and then top tight end Terrence Carter, who's been pretty damn fantasy friendly, has decided to portal as well. Now, you may remember the last time Louisiana was on the slate, it was during the Sun Belt Championship against Marshall, and Bill Davis was very chalky. He proceeded to rush for -2 yards, -0.2. A lot of us had a really good lineup in that slate, and you had to stare at negative points there for Bill Davis. So, I don't think anybody's going to roster him. It would be a really interesting spot to go back to. Zylan Perry's going to get some work as well. We saw Perry rack up 150 against ULM. Perhaps he gets more than Davis, though. It's, again, just a really kind of difficult situation to get too excited about. And it's a damn shame because, again, this is a very fantasy-friendly spot, and TCU's rushing defense has been pretty lackluster here throughout. The wide receiver spots, Lance Legendre, he is one that we want to consider. He has been the steady Eddie of the group, priced at 4.9, definitely a playable option. Like it feels wrong to completely fade this team against this TCU defense, but I just don't want to get involved with the quarterbacks, running backs. So the most logical way for us to do that and get a piece here is through Lance Legendre. Would have loved Terrence Carter had he not have opted out, but we don't have that option. Other potential looks here, Tavion Smith, Jacob Bernard. Smith is 3.6K. He's shown some mild flashes, does have some decent touchdown equity in the red zone. So definitely, a playable value if you want, but Legendre is really the one that you can trust the most out of this group. On the TCU side, an offense that has been extremely fantasy friendly throughout. Defensively, they have been horrible. They've been a very difficult team to bet on because of their inconsistent nature, but we'll try. They will have their quarterback at their disposal. We'll start with that. Josh Hoover, who's priced at 7.9K. A rough end of the season for him, after rattling out, 36, 29, 32, like just monster games over the first quarter to half of the season. And then he ends things after a pretty nice game against Baylor in week 10, 333 yards, 2 touchdowns, also rushed for a touchdown, which put him at 31, sub 16 fantasy points the rest of the way against Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Cincy. I'll give him Cincy. They were kind of good on defense, right? But Oklahoma State and Arizona, he can't be putting up those kinds of numbers there against those defenses. He will be missing quite a few pieces. The running back spots, Cam Cook and Dom Johnson have hit the portal. Cam Cook, throughout the season, really, he got the first crack at it, and he just never really got going. The week 1 against Stanford, he had 81 yards, did score a touchdown. He's really popular that week too. Week 2 against LIU, 3 touchdowns. Like, he had some pretty big games, but there was no consistency when they faced upper tier competition. He wasn't a consistent pass catcher, and you just saw as the season went on, his carries dwindled 3, 7, 6, 6, and 1. It didn't help that Savion Williams became a glorified running back as well. They tried to turn Trent Battle into the RB1. It didn't work out for him. They tried to turn Jeremy Payne into the RB1. It didn't really work out for him. And what we got was the running back room all getting 3 to 7 carries with Savion Williams doing the rest of the work. So it was an unplayable situation. I have a ton of interest in Payne at 3K. I'll be honest. I think he has major upside and can really pop in this game. And without Cook around, that definitely helps. They're also going to be without several of their wide receivers. Savion Williams is one of them who's opting out. Big time weapon, not only as a receiver, but as a running back as well. 8 carries against Cincinnati, 9 against Arizona, 11 against Texas Tech, 8 against Baylor, and 5 against Oklahoma State, 7 against Utah. So going back to week 8, they basically just turned Savion Williams into their running back. Now they won't have him. They also will not have Jack Beck, who has decided to enter the NFL draft. And then JoJo Earl, who's been dealing with an injury. So they're down some major pieces here in that receiver room. We can look to one of those running backs, I believe. This is also going to be a great opportunity for my man Eric McAllister, the Boise State transfer, to really have a big game here. With Williams and Beck out, that shrinks down that target share, that pecking order a lot. McAllister's priced at 4.2. He had some big games against SMU and Kansas, and then he suddenly saw his snaps going the wrong way. Something I noticed right around week 7, week 6, where his snaps just 15% compared to 40 to 50% of the snaps for everyone else. And in Savion Williamson's case, 70%. Very disturbing, but they're going to have to use him. So he's definitely one that I like. I think if anything, people will go to the 3.9K JP Richardson, who has some big games. 7 for 100 against Oklahoma State, 6 for 107 against Arizona, 2 for 50 against Cincy. He has major upside at that 3.9 price. That's a pretty good opportunity to kind of pivot there for 300 more and look to McAllister perhaps. But I am calling my shot on Jeremy Payne. I think he's the one to look at over Trent Battle. We'll have some opportunity here. This Louisiana rush defense is certainly susceptible. In fact, let's see what we got for prop bets here. Nothing on the game yet. So I want to see. We'll keep an eye on that one as we head into Friday night, early Saturday morning. But that's a game that I want to see some props for. There's none on DK either yet. Makes sense with all the opt-outs, so we'll see. But Jeremy Payne rushing props. Very interested in them if we can get them. All right, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, Iowa State versus Miami, total of 56.5. Miami 3.5-point favorites. The winner gets the badass Pop-Tart trophy. You can actually cook Pop-Tarts in this trophy. Who doesn't like Pop-Tarts? I like the brown sugar myself. Maybe you're a strawberry jelly, cherry, a s'mores fan. Definitely love the concept here in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And it's 2 teams that we're pretty damn familiar with. The Iowa State opt-outs, Jalen Jackson is suspended, which is interesting. They're going to be down a ton of their defensive line. But for the most part, Iowa State should have the majority of their weapons. I would say to keep an eye on Jaden Higgins or Jalen Noel. As of now, they're playing, but this is one of those situations where we wake up Saturday morning and I could easily see one of them decide to opt out or some funny business there. Rocco Beck, their starting quarterback, will be playing, barring something unforeseen. And then the remaining running backs, Abu Sama and Carson Hansen. The tough part with the running backs there is they have taken turns, all of them. It does make it, a little easier with Jalen Jackson suspended. He was arrested, unfortunately, here recently. So, I mean, if I had to lean one way, I'd say Abu Sama. He's priced at 3.4. Hanson's a little spendier at 4.5. Sama had that amazing snow game last year, and I just can't give him up just yet. Could see him absolutely blast off in this bowl game here. So, pretty good matchup, Miami. I worry about Miami's motivation for this one after they got knocked out before the playoffs. The season kind of unraveled for them quickly. Cam Ward didn't win the Heisman. So I think the running game gets going here. One of Hanson Sama is going to end up on optimal. I kind of feel confidently about that. Becht is the most expensive we've seen him, I think, all year at 8K. He's been a relatively cheap 6K guy for us. He's had some pretty nice performances. He's a very rock solid look. If he has his full receiver complement available, then I don't mind it. Miami defensively, they just don't play a complete game. They either start slow, finish fast, or they start fast, finish slow. Higgins is there at 7.9, Noel at 7.4. That's been the agreeable prices for them for the last month of the season. If they're playing a stack with Becht, makes a ton of sense, especially in large field GBP, but we'll keep an eye on that news for sure. On the Miami side, opt-out wise, Isaiah Horton did transfer to Alabama, so they will not have him. And A.J. Allen, kind of the RB2, 2B, has hit the transfer portal as well. Barring something that we don't know, Cam Ward should go. I don't think he's going to suddenly opt out. As of now, he's going to suit up. What we probably see here is those guys play, Arroyo, Restrepo, Damian Martinez, but I don't know that they'll play a full game. That's the main concern for me, especially with some of these guys who are going to be NFL bound. So just another one we'll monitor the news here. As it stands, I think they all play, but I am seriously concerned about them getting a full game. That also makes me very nervous about betting the Miami side. Ward's obviously way too expensive at 10.9. He has been all season. We've just basically shoved his passing prop 300 plus yards, 350 plus yards all season long. We haven't been able to use him in DFS since the early season or a short slate. Running backs wise, Damian Martinez, he's very cheap. I think this is a spot where Martinez again plays like a first quarter, but watch out for Jordan Lyle. That's the name to know. That's the youngster. That's kind of the future of the running back room here for Miami. Get some shares of him if you're running multiple lineups. I'm tempted to run him in my main, to be honest. He had a big game against Wake Forest, but he's flashed even before that. Week 4 against USF, 6 for 104. Against Ball State, 1171-1. He's just been very, very good. Just needs some more touches. Very capable. So I like Jordan Lyle. He'd be worth rostering for the second half alone, in my opinion. The receivers remaining, Restrepo's too expensive at 8.2, just not knowing if he's going to get a full allotment of minutes. Basketball brain, a full allotment of snaps. Jacoby George has been a sensational value for us, but he's priced up to 5.5 now. He's still the guy. Like, Restrepo is going to get all that defensive attention usually. George has been very, very consistent, and Cam Ward clearly trusts him. So even at 5.5, I do definitely like him. Arroyo is a nice value at 3.5. You're looking for a touchdown there for him. Look out for some Elijah Lofton. I think we see some additional snaps for him. You have Sam Brown at 3.1. Maybe he can have a nice little, season-ending big game there. He hasn't been great, but at near min price, he's worth a look. This is an interesting game. Afternoon, later, third game on the slate. We just have to pay attention to news. I doubt that we get through to that game without one of Restrepo, Ward, Noel, Higgins deciding to opt out, or news that they're going to be limited. With the betting side there, I do lean, as much as it pains me to say, the Iowa State side plus 3.5. I think that's a pretty damn strong bet for them to cover. Total, we'll leave that one alone. Arizona Bowl, Miami of Ohio versus Colorado State. It's a total of 40.5. That's Miami of Ohio -3. Hey, MAC teams making it happen. MAC teams. Toledo, Ohio, Tucker Gleason, love you. Parker Navarro, we love you. Parker Navarro's coming back to Ohio next year, by the way. Let's go. I like Miami of Ohio here. They are going to be missing a ton of players, and that's going to be a pretty big problem. Reggie Virgil has transferred out. Javon Tracy has transferred out. Dylan Downing is dealing with an injury, not the biggest running back there, although he did come from Purdue. Tracy headed to Minnesota, so big time, deal there for him. Virgil heading to Texas Tech. These just some really strong weapons that they're just not going to have at their disposal. So it's definitely makes it harder. I think if they had those guys, they would be favored by 7 or more. I do still like them. At this -3, especially, I have a feeling that it might be more like -2, -1.5 by game time. So kind of want to wait. But I do like Miami, Ohio to win this one. At the quarterback spots, 5.8K for Brett Gabbert. 30-plus pass attempts seems like a pretty good chance of that happening. He's not the best. Kind of like Raiola in that regard, right? You're going to get 10 to 15 fantasy points. Not too exciting, but the value is there. Running backs wise, Keon Mozzie, he is not opted out. Kenny Tracy is dealing with an injury, so Mozzie should be playing. 15 plus touches at 4.8 for him. We know there's major upside in that. Kevin Davis at 3.1K. He's shown some receiving upside with Virgil and Tracy out. Maybe we see Kevin Davis do some slot work. Maybe we see him, kind of operate as more of a receiver. So I do have some interest there in him as a sneakier option at 3.1K that I'll definitely be looking to. And the remaining receivers, Cade McDonald at 5K, he should be an absolute just animal without Virgil and Tracy. To start the season, McDonald was the WR1, dealt with some injuries, missed some time, and as they went on, Tracy and Virgil really established themselves. But look for him to, really have a pretty big game here as the number one pass catching option. 3.5K Cam Perry, he should see some additional usage, and even a guy like Jack Colderiron, who has been a consistent one catch guy near min price, should get a slight bump there. But most of my interest in Mozzie McDonald. On the Colorado State side, they have mostly depth pieces out, some starters on the defensive line side. Caleb Goody at wide receiver and Jamari Pearson do hit the transfer portal. Torrey Horton, who was their best receiver early, has been hurt, as we know. They will have Avery Morrow, so they've got the best running back. Goody has been, over the last month of the season, kind of their best receiver. They haven't been a great team by any means, but with him in the portal, it leaves things pretty light in the receiver room. Vince Brown, I think, is your best option at 3.9. He had the big game against Utah State. I do worry that they're not going to be able to move the ball particularly well. Jamari Pearson had been pretty consistent as well, but again, he's also in the transfer portal. So kind of their three best guys all out. We have seen Armani Winfield have some pretty decent games. He's priced there at 3.7. I think he is a viable look if you do want exposure here somewhere. Jordan Ross, same kind of deal, priced at 3.6. A guy that can give you 3 to 5 receptions here, but nothing that we're super confident in. Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, another cheap quarterback on the slate at 6K. He had 41 against Utah State. He's shown this kind of upside over the past couple of seasons. Has dealt with a, inconsistent with his play calling decisions. His reads have been awful. He hasn't stayed particularly healthy because he does take sacks. So we've seen some pretty poor games from him, but you saw definitely one of the, best games of his career there against Utah State. And I almost wonder if people will kind of jump on that. He has scored 20 plus DK points in 3 straight, but I do think this Miami of Ohio team, they were embarrassed a bit by our guy Parker Navarro, but Braden Fowler Nicolosi is not Parker Navarro. And this Miami Ohio defense has been fairly stout for a lot of the season, at least in MAC play. That leaves us with the running backs. In Miami, Ohio's running defense especially has been really strong, except for when they have to play Parker Navarro. But Avery Morrow at 5'9" as a bell cow back, he has to be in consideration at that price point. We have seen injuries to him and Justin Marshall as they've kind of traded off. Marshall didn't get hardly any work against Utah State, and that was a tough one because he was priced so cheap. Morrow steps in after, being banged up against Fresno State and handles 21 carries. He wasn't particularly great in that one with 80 yards. Clearly wasn't fully healthy, but I do think he kind of dominates the touches here in this game. But we're betting on Miami of Ohio and looking to Keon Mozzie and Cade McDonald as our DFS options. All right, moving on, we have the Military Bowl between ECU and NC State. It's a total of 58.5, one of the highest totals on the board. A 6-point favorite in towards of NC State. Opt-outs for ECU. Chase Sowell has transferred, very highly sought after wide receiver. He is the main look there. Potential first-round pick on defense. Rebel, who did tear his ACL. He's going to be moving on there once he gets his health stuff. There's several starters on the defensive line that are opting out as well. They have fired their coach, Mike Houston. Interim is Blake Harrell. He went 4-1. They're going to give him the full meal deal now. They kind of really rallied around him after he took the gig, and they've been a very solid team since then. The other cornerback outside of Revel, Isaiah Brown-Murray, another potential NFL guy, has decided to portal as well. So the secondary is going to be susceptible here for ECU, but they're mainly intact outside of on the offensive side. I have been a big proponent of Kattenhauser. I like the quarterback in the ECU offense for years, regardless of who has been the coach or the staff. Kattenhauser this year has just been another look. In the past, Holton Ehlers has been a very fun play for us. Hauser really started the season off pretty lackluster once he took the reins, but he had a huge game against Army, huge game against Temple, monster game against FAU where he almost put up 50. He's been really, really good. The attempts have been there. There's rushing upside to a degree. I still don't think he's getting enough credit. Yes, it hurts not having Sowell, but this NC State team, obviously they disappointed this year. At the beginning of the season, I thought they had a legitimate chance of coming out of the ACC. Injuries to McCall, things just didn't work out. But I do like Hauser a lot at 7.5. He's one of my favorite quarterbacks on the slate. We're going to see a lot in the BYU Colorado game, which we're going to talk about here in a second. We do have Army on the slate as well, but Kattenhauser at 7.5, I think, has a chance to put up 30 plus here in this spot. The running back spot, Rajay Harris, he's been solid, bell cow all the way, 20 plus carries. I would expect that continue here. Might see a couple of touches here for guys like London Montgomery, Marlon Gunn. Montgomery's been pretty solid. I actually do like him to a degree at 3.6 as well. It's kind of a GPP type of pivot. But I'm mainly going to be on Hauser and one of his receivers. Without Saul, we still have Anthony Smith, priced there at 5.3K, 38 catches for 770 yards and 6 touchdowns on the year. And then Winston Wright at 5.8K, 54 catches, 556 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Also 14 carries for 91 yards. They've schemed ways to get him the ball. Those are the top 2 options. If you play Hauser, I would highly recommend you play at least one. I do kind of lean towards Anthony Smith. I think he has the better probability of a 100-yard game on lesser targets, so he's been a little bit more efficient. Wright is more of the PPR look to me. Get 7 to 8 receptions out of him, but lower upside overall, but he does have very high touchdown equity. You could run a 3-man ECU stack and feel pretty good about it in this game. I truly believe that. On the NC State side, KC Concepcion has decided to transfer. It was going to happen. Brother has, no longer decided to go there as well. They have been able to keep CJ Bailey at quarterback, so that is at least bringing the new year, with a smile to Wolfpack fans. I think there's going to be other opt-outs here from what I've read. They have some offensive linemen who are probably NFL bound, so we'll see how that shakes out. Some guys in the secondary are injured. But I think by the time we get to their game, more names are going to be out. 6.3K for CJ Bailey. It's a very playable price. Threw for almost 250 against UNC, but the rushing upside is what we're playing there for him. 255 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. Has thrown for 2,114 touchdowns overall. I hate that he doesn't have KC, but you know what? The opposing defenses put all of their efforts into defending him, and it just left other guys open. So if anything, this is going to balance out the rest of the offense because KC couldn't get the ball anyways. Running back, come on. Hollywood Smothers. This is the Hollywood Smothers game. Alex knows. If you're an NC State fan, you know. 4.9K. Hollywood Smothers all day long. He has been putting up some really nice games. North Carolina State hasn't been on the slate, so unless you're a super fan or you are, a diehard who checks this stuff or bets on this stuff, you probably have missed some of these Smothers games. But he's making the best of a dire situation. He has just been so awesome. Stanford, he racked up 100 yards. That's a Stanford team defensively. They've been pretty good against the run, not so much against the pass. But a big game there. He rushed for 25 yards against a tough Cal team, but it was his receiving game that really flourished there. 6 for 87 and a touchdown. 4 of his last 5, he's been over 15 DK points. 3 of his last 5 over 20. His season finale game, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 receptions, 34 yards on his way to 26.7. Has been a very big bright spot for this team. We're not looking at Jordan Waters, who's still getting carries for sure. Not looking at the timeless Kendrick Raphael, who's still getting carries for sure. But Hollywood Smothers, the future is here. The future is now. 4.9K. We're locking him in. At wide receiver, no thanks. I don't have a lot of affinity towards any of them. Tight end Justin Jolly is only 3.3K, but reading some of the rumors, there's a possibility that he opts out. Maybe not. We'll see. I do think there's some upside for guys like Dakari Collins, who's priced there at 3.6. Maybe Bailey can get some shots off here. Wesley Grimes there at 4.5. Definitely capable double-digit guy, but give me Hollywood Smothers all day long. Kattenhauser and one of his receivers. This is a mini stat game. One of the higher totals on the slate, so we'll have company, but I think that's a great way to build and start our lineups. All right, moving on, we have BYU. yeah. Hollywood Smothers, you know. Gonna get a jersey. I think he's gonna be a big-time player. I don't know. I just love to watch that guy play. Hopefully we'll have the Wolfpack on a lot more slates next year. Alamo Bowl, BYU versus Colorado. It's a total of 54.5. Colorado, a 3.5-point favorite. This is the game of the slate in terms of competitiveness, and 2 teams that I think will treat this like we saw today out of Rutgers and Kansas State, treating a bowl game like it's actually a meaningful end of the season type of situation, not just another exhibition or another game, and 2 teams that are going to really try hard to win this one. You can rest assured Colorado will. They have done some sort of insurance coverage here. The amount of money is unknown, but they have ensured that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, your reigning Heisman Trophy winner, will play in this game. Ordinarily, those 2 would be sitting out because they have nothing left to prove, and they're going to be guaranteed draft picks, right? But they're going to get paid money to do this. There's going to be insurance for all involved, and they're going to play. So that means we have to consider the Colorado guys like a regular game, and that's 9.5K Travis Hunter, and that's 9.7K Shedeur Sanders. I would expect Sanders to throw 30-plus times in this game. He doesn't need to, but it's going to turn – I think this one turns into a competitive affair, and they're not going to want to lose their final collegiate game. Come on. If you can get the salary to Sanders, it makes a lot of sense. His floor is extremely high in this one. Looking at some of the opt-outs, Isaiah Augustave is questionable. I don't even want to talk or use any of the running backs from this team. One time this season I did bite on a Colorado running back, was Augustave, and he was awful. He got barely any carries, so no thank you. Michael Welch, Dallin Hayden, Charlie Offerdale, all of them have had moments where Prime told us that they were going to be the guy, and they haven't turned out to it. So we can just ignore all the running backs on the Colorado. It's just a matter of, do we want to roster some of their receivers? And we definitely do. Guys who have transferred in the receiver room: Cordell Russell, Jordan Onbugi, and Asad Wasim, all lesser used guys. Jimmy Horn still dealing with the injury issue. I don't think we'll see him. That leaves us with not only Hunter, but LeJontay Weister, Will Shepard, Savion Smalls, and Draylon Miller, who is probably going to be a future star for this team, even though Colorado's already starting to do work in the portal. We saw that huge game from Miller against Utah, 6-108 and a touchdown. Followed that up with 5-44 and a touchdown against Kansas. Didn't do a lot against Oklahoma State, but that was the Travis Hunter game. Very cheap price still on Will Shepard. We've gotten some really nice performances out of him. Huge low rostership against Texas Tech, delivered us a monster game. Then he was chalky against Utah the following week, another monster game. I think we see people kind of forget about him again, especially since his price. It went up to 5.5 after those big games. He did have 6 for 67 against Oklahoma State. Just kind of fell by the wayside. People didn't really see it because of Hunter's big performance. But at 4.3, Will Shepard is absolutely main team viable. Wester's too expensive for me at 7.2. I think you just make the decision to pay down, or you make the decision to pay up. If it's a matter of I can only pay for one of Sanders or Hunter, I do lean Travis Hunter for what it's worth. This is one where he's going to have multiple touchdowns. And, the drama, let's talk about it for a minute. The drama with his fiance, Lord, I hope that he didn't get her pregnant. That might be weighing on his mind, but I think he's going to take that as a, F the world type situation here. Hopefully there's no more videos of her dancing on men that come out. Good grief. But I do think Hunter has a pretty monster game, and I think that they're force-feeding him the rock throughout. You just hope that no injuries transpire. And almost wonder how much defense will he actually play. But offensively, I think we see a big game out of Hunter. Well worth that price. On the BYU side, it looked like BYU was going to be a playoff team for a long-ass time. And then, of course, they just started to falter later in the season. Hinckley Rapade dealing with an injury at the running back spot. Miles Davis hitting the transfer portal. Cody Epps hitting the transfer portal. Very productive 2 to 3 years ago, falling off this year. And Jackson Bowers, one of their tight ends, one of their many tight ends, has decided to hit the transfer portal as well. But for the most part, they're going to have those key pieces. There is a offensive lineman dealing with an injury who is one of their more important offensive linemen, and a safety who is going to be hitting the transfer portal, which is one of their best options in the secondary. So definitely some pieces, but for the most part, they're intact. Jake Retzlaff is an agreeable price at 7.7. He's a little bit of a mistake-prone player, and he did not end the season well. When the losses started happening, it got away from him in a hurry. Only 2 touchdowns in his last 4 games, but 3 interceptions in that span, a fumble loss, just multiple mistakes happen for Retzlaff. He does have major rushing upside, so I'll give him that, but he's definitely a middling play here. With Ropati dealing with the injury and Miles Davis hitting the transfer portal, it really leaves LJ Martin for a huge workload. Now, we know the nature of BYU and how they do things. Enoch Nahoeen is still probably going to get some carries. Sion Mayo, who is probably still going to get some carries, just enough to pilfer away. But Martin should get 20-plus carries. This Colorado rush defense is nothing special whatsoever. I think if he gets 20 to 25 carries, we see 100-plus rushing yards, at least a touchdown. Love LJ Martin. He's priced down at 6.8. He got up to 7.5 at a point there. Has been under 10 DK points in 4 straight. I don't think we see a ton of rostership on him, but I have always been high on LJ Martin, and I will remain high on him for this slate. As far as the receivers go, you got the 2 main options, but they're priced up at 6.5 and 6.3, and Darius Lassiter and Chase Roberts. I don't think I'm paying up to those prices for them. Having Epps hit the portal kind of makes a guy like Parker Kingston, who's flashed some upside at times here, somewhat interesting. I also really like JoJo Phillips, who's priced at near min price at 3.3. 40-yard reception in their last game against Houston, a 21-yard touchdown against ASU. And earlier on in the season, all the way back in week 1, He had a 57-yard touchdown reception, a big play threat. You're looking at him mainly as a GBP type of look, but he's gone from 4.2 back down to nearly min price at 3.3. He's not going to get volume. He's not a good PPR look, but I do think he can catch a long touchdown in a game that could potentially turn into a shootout, knowing the way that Colorado plays and the way that BYU's kind of fallen apart here recently. So plenty of exposure to this game, most definitely. The betting side on that one, it's only a 54.5 total. I do like the over there. Probably not going to lean aside. BYU games have kind of gotten away from us and the masses a little bit. So just taking the total over 54.5. This is one where I could very easily see it turn into like the Toledo game today where we get multiple overtimes. We finish things up with the Independence Bowl. Between Army and Louisiana Tech. It's a total of 44. Army comes in as pretty big favorite, 16.5. Look at them, just like Syracuse over here. Army will have the ball plenty. We know that. As far as any relevant opt-outs, quarterback position has been heinous for Louisiana Tech. They've gone through a bunch. Jack Turner is in the portal. Donario Davenport is in the portal at the running back spot. And then True Edwards, top option there in the wide receiver room, has also decided to hit the transfer portal. It leaves Tech with Evan Bullock as their starter at 6'6". He has taken the reins here for the last, 2 months. He's had some pretty big games, but overall, he's very hard to trust. And I don't know that Louisiana Tech is going to get the possessions they need for him to be viable. So we're not going to look to him. With Davenport out, Omiri Riggins has been the de facto number one option. He rushed for 130 yards against Kennesaw State. He has been a very consistent pass catcher as well. So I don't mind him at 4.6, but he's still going to cede work to the likes of Amani Givens, Marquise Crosby, Fred Robinson. All of these guys are getting somewhere between 1 to 9 carries compared to Wiggins as well. So he's not typically going to get a huge 20 carry workload. With True Edwards hitting the portal, that's tough. He's been the best receiver. He'll have plenty of looks, 77 catches, 900 yards, 6 touchdowns. Without him, top option really becomes Jimmy Holiday, who's priced there at 4.6. He had a 100-yard game against Kennesaw, and he's had some pretty nice games whenever Latex has been on the slate several times this year. He gets carries. They factor him in a lot. Another one, pilfering work from Wiggins. 4 of his last 5, he's been over 4 carries. So just a myriad of touches for Jimmy Holiday. I actually like him quite a bit against Army here because even if they have lesser possessions, when they do have it in their drives, he's going to be the one getting a ton of work. The other one that's interesting in terms of wide receivers with main team viability, Marleon Jackson at near min price 3.3. Believe he's good to go. He hasn't really played it since the middle part of the season. We'll see how that works out. And then Jay Wilkerson priced at 3.4K. We'll get some more clarity there on who's dressed and who's not warming up. It is one of the later games on Saturday night, though, so stay tuned for any and all news there. On the Army side, this is a Army team that had a transfer. You don't see too many transfers coming into Army because obviously it's military, right? But you do see transfers out. And we did see Kanye Udo after their loss to Navy decide to hit the transfer portal. He is the main one. They've got a couple of defenders who are dealing with injuries and are highly questionable, but they're going to have the majority of their offense intact. And they are going to throttle a Louisiana Tech team that is 5-7, got in because of Marshall having to pull out of the bowl because Marshall lost 75% of their starters and their roster to the portal. So they couldn't play in this game. So that means Louisiana Tech at 5-7 gets in. Not having Kanye Udo isn't a problem for me. In fact, I actually prefer them without Kanye Udo, to be honest. This means at 10.2K, we got to find a way to get Bryson Daly. He was awful against Navy. Navy came in with a plan. They kept Army off the ball as much as possible, and they really bothered Daly. And once a a lead was extended, it forced Army to throw the football more, and he got picked off 3 times. And majority of the year when they've passed, it's been on their terms. They're kind of trick plays. They're morphed triple option offense. But he had to throw some bombs, and they were duck balls, and he continued to get picked off. So extremely rattled there. Maybe that brings his ownership down to a degree. He was priced at almost 11K that day. He's 10-2 here. He should absolutely rush for 150 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. I don't know that we can get away with fading him. Now I'm interested with Udo out. Obviously, the short and quick answer is Noah Short should see a lot of work. We'll also see Hayden Reed, who's, he was more productive last year, but he's still a factor. But I'm curious to see if Tyrell Robinson, the former quarterback of Army pre-injury, converted into a running back wide receiver combination type player, priced here at 3.9, gets some work. No work against Navy, only 1 carry against Tulane, but he had 5 carries against UTSA, 3 receptions for 46 yards, scored his first touchdowns of the season. I really think Tyrell Robinson is an intriguing GPP look here. Not willing to utilize him in high dollar single entry stuff, but running those multiple lineups in the large field stuff. Tyrell Robinson at 1.1%, if that, and he scores a touchdown at 3.9, possibly 2, could be a really big play. So be aware of Tyrell Robinson there with Kanye Udo out. At wide receiver, Casey Reynolds is the WR1, but there's not, he might break one for a touchdown, right? But typically we're just going to lean on our guy Bryson Daly and possibly take one of these sub 5K and sub 4K running backs on the Army side. We're definitely taking Army minus 16.5. I think they're probably going to win by 20 plus. The only thing that might happen is they don't, they run the clock out so much that maybe losing a check if they can score once, they can cover, but I doubt it. I would feel good about that up to like 18, honestly. Total is only 44. We're not going to touch that one. The core for this slate should probably be obvious. It is another one where I think we're taking 2 quarterbacks. I know that as the leader of the 4 running back movement, we just haven't had the slates that warrant it. We don't have, LJ Martin at 6.8 is our most expensive running back, and we have a lot of secondary speculative options. So this is just another of the 2 quarterback slates. For me, Bryson Daly, obvious. I think we pay up for him, but Kattenhauser is my favorite, so I will core him as my top quarterback on the slate. At the running back position, I have a ton of speculative looks. Jordan Lyle of Miami, for example, Jeremy Payne of TCU. A lot of secondary and whatnot, but Hollywood Smothers in the same game at 4.9. That's core play number 2. Just give me all of that action there in ECU, NC State. And then core running back, or core wide receiver, because that gives us some value, we can pay up for one of these receivers. Got to come up and find a way, I think, to Travis Hunter. I'm not as excited about Restrepo because I don't believe he's going to play the whole game. I believe one of Higgins Noel ends up opting out. So it really just leaves us with Travis Hunter, who I think has another massive game. So we'll go Kattenhauser, Hollywood Smothers, and Travis Hunter. Also like at least one of those ECU wide receivers as kind of a 4th core piece between Winston Wright and Anthony Smith. I do lean Anthony Smith because the nature of NC State's defense this year, giving up big plays, but I'm happy with either one. I want the ECU mini stack there with Hollywood Smothers. That's going to take us to the promised land. All right, so that is the slate. Feel pretty good about this one for both and the showdowns, if you wish. There's a lot of good betting opportunities. I will have those all in the not only the bet tracker, but the CFB betting room there on the FTN Discord. Lots of good stuff happening there. You can expect all of that out and the free article before the Oklahoma game starts by a couple hours. So that'll be bright and early. Lots of opportunities for us to find the green screens and those window trips. And then, of course, next week we've got more playoff action. And we'll just be grinding through CBB as we start our ascent towards March Madness. Speaking of which, March Madness is going to be in the Pacific Northwest. There is first and second round games. Tickets are expensive, but I'm going to find a way to go and do a live show, perhaps from the arena at March Madness. So be ready for that. Appreciate you guys. On your way out, please make sure you hit the like button. All of those interactions, whether you like, retweet, repost, or comment, help us so very much. Mike Randall will be going live here in the next day on his CBB betting show. Make sure you check that out. And then next week, there will be content galore, 2 CBB shows, and a college football show going over the playoffs. Be ready for that as well. Take care, guys. Best of luck. Let's have a big, big Friday. I'll see you guys early next week for another episode of the CFB Super Show. Appreciate it, everybody. Take care.